The story of the Exodus is a story of hope, it's a story of faith, and it's a story of freedom. It's the story of the Israelites, God's chosen people enslaved in the mighty empire of Egypt. For generations they toiled under the harsh rule of the Pharaoh, their cries for freedom ignored. They built monuments to their oppressors, their lives filled with backbreaking labor and despair. But their cries did not go unheard. Their God, Yahweh, saw their suffering. He heard their prayers. He would not abandon his people. He promised deliverance. The Israelites' faith was tested. They had almost forgotten the promises of their God. They had nearly lost hope. But even in their darkest hour, a glimmer of hope remained. A promise whispered from generation to generation. A promise of a deliverer, a leader who would rise from amongst them, a man named Moses. Moses, chosen by God, confronted Pharaoh. He demanded the release of his people. Pharaoh scoffed. He refused to acknowledge Yahweh. Pharaoh's heart, hardened by pride and arrogance, would not be swayed by mere words. So God, in his infinite power, decided to show Pharaoh the might of his hand. He would bring upon Egypt a series of plagues, each more devastating than the last. These weren't just random acts of destruction. Each plague was a targeted strike against the gods of Egypt, a demonstration of Yahweh's absolute power over the natural world. The Egyptians believed their gods controlled every aspect of their lives, from the Nile River to the sun in the sky. But Yahweh, the one true God, would show them the folly of their beliefs. The first plague struck at the heart of Egypt, turning their lifeblood, the Nile River, into blood. Fish died, the water stank, and the Egyptians could no longer drink from their sacred river. The Nile, worshipped as a god, was now a source of death and disgust. Then came the frogs, millions of them, swarming from the Nile, invading homes, beds, even Pharaoh's palace. Hetep, the frog-headed goddess of fertility, was mocked by this infestation. Her creatures, instead of representing life and abundance, brought chaos and revulsion. The ground teemed, the air buzzed, and still Pharaoh's heart remained hardened. He refused to free the Israelites, so God sent the gnats, tiny biting insects. They swarmed in thick black clouds, infesting everything and everyone. Geb, the god of the earth, could not stop them. Even the magicians of Pharaoh, who had initially replicated the first two plagues, were powerless against this plague. "This is the finger of God," they admitted, terrified, but Pharaoh remained unmoved. The fourth plague brought swarms of flies. Different from the gnats, these insects were relentless, buzzing, biting, driving the Egyptians to distraction. Khepri, the scarab-headed god, symbol of rebirth and the morning sun, offered no protection from this plague. The air grew thick with flies, their buzzing a constant torment. The stench of decay as animals succumbed to the infestation filled the air. Then a terrible pestilence struck the livestock of Egypt. Cows, sheep, horses, all were struck down by a deadly disease. Apis, the bull god, and Hathor, the cow goddess, offered no protection to their animal representations. The Egyptians watched in horror as their livelihoods, their source of food, were decimated. Still, Pharaoh refused to relent, so God, in his righteous anger, sent the plague of boils. Painful, festering sores erupted on the bodies of the Egyptians, covering them from head to toe. Serket, the scorpion goddess of healing, could offer no relief. Even Pharaoh himself was afflicted. Section 5. Hail, locusts, and darkness, the earth trembles. The heavens themselves seemed to open up during the seventh plague. Hail, accompanied by thunder and fire, rained down upon Egypt. Crops were destroyed, trees were splintered, and homes were reduced to rubble. Nut, the sky goddess, seemed powerless to stop the assault from above. Shu, god of the air, offered no protection from the fury of the storm. The land, once fertile and prosperous, now lay in ruins. The eighth plague brought locusts, billions of them, devouring everything the hail had spared. They descended upon the land like a living blanket, stripping fields bare, leaving nothing but devastation in their wake. The air was thick with the sound of their buzzing wings. The sun was blotted out as they descended, a living testament to Yahweh's power. Even Seth, the god of chaos, seemed insignificant compared to the devastation wrought by these insects. Then came the darkness, a thick, palpable darkness that enveloped Egypt for 3 days. Ra, the sun god, was powerless to pierce this unnatural gloom. The Egyptians, accustomed to the brilliant sun, were plunged into a terrifying darkness. They could not see their hand in front of their faces. The sounds of their city, usually a comfort, now echoed eerily in the darkness. Fear gripped the hearts of the Egyptians, a fear unlike anything they had ever known. Section 6, the final plague, a night of sorrow and liberation. The 10th and final plague was the most devastating. It was a plague of death. The firstborn of every Egyptian family, from the Pharaoh's son to the firstborn of the lowliest slave, was struck down in the night. The cries of mourning echoed through the land. Even Pharaoh, his heart finally broken by the loss of his son, could no longer deny the power of Yahweh. He summoned Moses and Aaron. "Go," he cried. "Leave my land, take your people and your God and go." Section 7, the Passover, a covenant sealed in blood. But the story of the Exodus is not just about the plagues, it's also about the Passover, a celebration of God's protection and deliverance. Before the final plague, God instructed Moses to tell the Israelites to sacrifice a lamb and mark their doorposts with its blood. This would be a sign for the angel of death to pass over their homes, sparing their firstborn sons. The Passover is a powerful reminder of God's covenant with his people. It's a story of faith, obedience, and redemption. It's a story that's still celebrated today, thousands of years later, by Jews all over the world. It's a reminder that even in the darkest of times, God is always with us. Section 8. Exodus, a people set free by God's hand. With the break of dawn, the Israelites, guided by a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night, began their exodus from Egypt. They left the land of their oppression, carrying with them the memory of their suffering and the hope of a new life. They were free. Their journey would be long and arduous. They would face challenges and hardships, but they would never forget the God who had delivered them from slavery. They would carry his laws, his promises, and his love with them etched upon their hearts. Section 9, the Red Sea crossing, a testament to God's power. Their escape was not easy. Pharaoh, his heart hardened once more by anger and regret, pursued the Israelites with his army. He trapped them against the shores of the Red Sea, seemingly with nowhere to go, but God, in a display of awesome power, parted the waters of the sea. The Israelites walked through on dry land, the walls of water towering on either side. When Pharaoh and his army followed, the waters crashed down, swallowing them whole. The Red Sea crossing became a symbol of God's power and protection, a testament to his unwavering love for his people. It was a defining moment in the history of the Israelites, a moment that would be remembered and celebrated for generations to come. The story of the Exodus is more than just an ancient tale. It's a story of hope, faith, and freedom. It's a story that reminds us that even in the darkest of times, God is with us, ready to deliver us from our own personal Egypts.